This is Carolina Ghost Towns, a podcast about the vanished towns and lost communities in South Carolina, North Carolina, and maybe a few other places. I'm your host, Tom Taylor. There's a popular meme that goes something like this. Any untended open space will spontaneously generate a Dollar General store. They do seem to be everywhere. Despite the derision heaped upon the brand, they do provide a service. In the dying town of Greycourt, where I grew up and lived my early adult life, the Dollar General was a convenience when we didn't want to drive up to Fountain Inn or down to Lawrence. We could get just about any household item we needed. Despite the garish logo and apart from its corporate structure, it was probably more like the general stores of old than we realize. So the question for today is, does the presence of a Dollar General or similar brand negate the designation of a locale as a ghost town? Or do we just dismiss it as an artifact of modern life? That's especially pertinent in today's ghost town, where a new Dollar General sits at a crossroads that still bears the name of the town. Chappells now sits at the intersection of State Highways 34 and 39 in the southwest corner of Newberry County, South Carolina. On one corner sits the aforementioned Dollar General. On the other, a defunct store and post office, and on a third, a gas station and convenience store. But this isn't the real town, the old town. The old town of Chappells is a block over on what is now a disused, dead-end street. In 1756, Thomas Chappell requested and was granted permission to build a bridge across the Saluda River to connect his plantation with the Culbreth plantation on the other side of the river. Apparently, the bridge was never constructed. According to local historian Barbara Holloway Smith, the Chappell and Culbreth families arrived at the same time in the mid-1700s. Thomas Chappell acquired over 10,000 acres of land. He operated a mule-drawn ferry across the Saluda River, and during the Revolutionary War, his wife, Delia, kept the ferry running and collected the tolls. Chappell built a store nearby, establishing the first commerce in the area. Operation of the ferry and the store were eventually taken over by Thomas's son, John. Chappell's Ferry appears on the Mills 1825 map of Newberry District, spelled C-H-A-P-L-E. John Chappell built the first bridge over the river in 1845, a single-span wooden bridge which was washed away in the Great Flood of 1854. Even with a bridge in place, the area was known as Chappell's Ferry from the Revolutionary War until sometime after the Civil War. In the years following the Civil War, the ferry was operated by William Smith, who donated land to rebuild a bridge across the Saluda. When I'm researching a lost town, I always check the newspaper archives to get a feel for life in that town. In the Newberry Weekly Herald, there were announcements about social events, advertisements for businesses, notices of land for sale, and even a notice about a minstrel show coming through the region. The thing that struck me was the abundance of crime reports. Some of these even involved members of the Chappell family.
Jesse M. Lawson, long unfavorably known to this and other communities, met with a sudden but nonetheless just death on Wednesday.
An affray occurred on last Friday at or near Chappells Depot, which resulted in the death of Stanford Chappell and a freed boy.
The store of Messrs. Sulzbacher and Company, near Chappells Depot, was forcibly entered on Monday night, the 23rd, by 8 men who tied the clears.
A Negro man was found dead near Chappells Depot on Saturday morning last. There were some bruises on the face and back of the head, which leads to the supposition that he was...
Information has just been received of a fight at Newberry yesterday, which resulted in the shooting of 2 men by the name of Chappell by a man named Harp. The dispute arose about a cockfight. One account says that both of the Chappells...
It seems that the salacious headlines are always the ones that grab attention. Right after the Civil War, the town was especially lawless. In 1865, the citizens met to set up a constabulary to keep order in the town.
Whereas circumstances over which we have no control have suddenly occurred to suspend the functions of all government in our midst and to leave our community in common with others in our land victims of a ruthless anarchy. Be it therefore resolved that we, the inhabitants of this immediate neighborhood, do hereby constitute ourselves into an organized or constabulary force for the purpose of restraining all violence and excesses.
Sometime after the Civil War, in the late 1800s, the Columbia and Greenville Railroad came through, and instead of Chappell's Ferry, the area became known as Chappells Depot. The thriving community had several stores, and commerce was starting to take off when the first of several calamities struck. According to John Abney Chapman in the Annals of Newberry,
efforts have been made to make Chappells Depot on the GNCRR a place of business, but with only moderate success. There are some stores there and considerable business is done. On the 19th of February, 1884, the great cyclone or tornado struck it and swept the whole concern away. Some persons were killed and others very seriously injured.
the tornado of 1884 demolished all of the businesses, as well as most of the residences. It toppled a train that was also at the depot at the time of the storm. The town was rebuilt, though. Eventually, there were several stores, a cotton gin, post office, and even a doctor and a bank in the area. Barbara Smith gave a talk to the Newberry and Edgefield Genealogy Societies about life in the town. I'm going to quote from her presentation. Downtown Old Chappells was the gathering place for the men of the community. After they had checked on the fields and the hands in the morning, they would go to Chappells to sit around the stores, talk, and play checkers. There was a special bench that they had rigged up with an electrical current that they would invite strangers to sit and then be shocked. They went home for dinner, which we would call lunch, took a nap, came back to town for a few hours, then headed out to the fields to check on the day's work before going home for supper. On October 20th, 1908, the town was issued a charter for incorporation. By the next year, Chappells could boast of the Farmers Bank, 2 hotels, garages, livery stables, general mercantile stores, a jail, blacksmith shops, cotton brokerage offices, building for storing cotton, grist mills, butcher shops, churches, 3 doctors, a barber shop, and even a black marble fountain where soft drinks were made. They came in on the train from Columbia, and at its peak, there were 15 stores. In the early 1900s, there was no electricity, running water, and only one telephone that was in the Henry Dipner store. A few homes had carbide lights and windmills for running water. My thanks to Barbara for sending me this wonderful information. William Smith, the last ferry operator at Chappells, was one of Barbara's ancestors and was also the first mayor of the town. Another news report in the Newberry Weekly Herald praised the small town, but had concern for its future.
It was our fortune to spend several hours in Chappells on last Saturday. Chappells is an historic place, being a city of high water, floods, and cyclones. It is a great pity, when the town was completely swept away by the cyclone a few years ago, that the town was not rebuilt out on the hill, about a half mile from the railroad. There is a beautiful location about that distance for a town. As it is, Chappells is a thriving little village. If Chappells were moved off the river, we do not think there would be so many vacant storerooms.
This area seems to have been dealt more than its fair share of disasters. Fires in the early part of the 1900s destroyed some businesses, and other technological factors came into play as well. In his book, The History of Newberry County, South Carolina, 1860 through 1990, Thomas Pope states that, quote, "The improved roads then being constructed proved to be the death knell of the little villages." A 1926 Sanborn insurance map of the area indicates several places of business, as well as the depot. However, much of that area is listed as vacant. The final blow came shortly after the Sanborn map was made. In 1926, there was another catastrophic flood that wiped out most of the remaining businesses. In 1929, the bank closed in the midst of the stock market crash. In 1931, Highway 39 was moved to the west, and a new concrete and steel girder bridge was built over the river. This routed traffic off of the old main, effectively bypassing the remaining businesses. Eventually, all of them closed. The modern community of Chappells is a far cry from the town it once was. Until construction of the aforementioned Dollar General, it had become little more than a stop on the way to Lake Greenwood. The original town is hidden away on what is now an overgrown, dead-end street. Just a block to the east of Highway 39 is the old Main Street. An old gas station with brick columns sits near the upper end of the street. The remains of several stores are further down. Most of these are just bits of brick walls with no roof. Somewhat off of the street is an old wooden structure that once served as a church. The last time I explored the area, the old church was leaning precariously, held only in place by a sapling. The main street now ends in a turnaround loop. Beyond that was the depot, now long gone. The railroad is still in use, but the trains no longer stop. There are some positive signs in Old Chappells, though. The former schoolhouse has been used as a community center, and later as an event space. It's now the old schoolhouse restaurant and bar. The Saluda River has become an attraction. There are access points for kayaking below the Buzzard's Roost Dam just west of Chappells, and at the Highway 39 bridge right next to the old town. A new development called the Territories has been built in a deep bend of the Saluda. just southwest of Chappells. The focus of the development is on outdoor activities on the Saluda River. There is even a new steel footbridge across the river along a former route of the railroad. It seems that the river that gave birth to Chappells Ferry has given Chappells new life. That does it for this episode of Carolina Ghost Towns. My thanks to Barbara Holloway Smith for her information about her family's history and life in Chappells. Other voices used in this episode were generated by 11 Labs AI Services. As usual, please share this podcast, subscribe, rate us, and give us feedback. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
In this southern ghost town, we found a story untold. In the shadows of the past, we unravel, secrets unfold. With each step we take, we journey back in time. In this southern ghost town, we leave our footprints behind.
Thanks for listening. The opening music was composed by Lex FM with additional music from Pixabay. The song Southern Ghost Town was generated by Suno AI. All other music was composed and recorded by me, Tom Taylor. Carolina Ghost Towns is a part of the Random Connections empire. It's pretty much a one-man show, so I wear all the hats, including producer, writer, researcher, sound engineer, publicist, and bartender. If you like the show, please subscribe on your favorite pod venue and be sure to give us feedback. If you have questions, comments, or ideas for the show, you can reach me at carolinaghosttownspod@gmail.com. For more information and show notes, visit randomconnections.com. Thank you.
In this southern ghost town, we found a story untold. In the shadows of the past, we unravel, secrets unfold. With each step we take, we journey back in time. In this southern ghost town, we leave our footprints behind.